Christopher Nolan has been one of the safest bets in Hollywood for a very long time. When his name gets attached to a movie, people don't really argue about whether they're going to see it. They argue about whether they're seeing it in IMAX, whether they're seeing it twice an opening weekend, or whether it's going to be one of those rare films that actually feel like a proper cinematic event. His movies have always carried this built-in anticipation. Even when the trailers are vague or the plot is kept under wraps, the excitement is usually pretty high. Nolan has that rare status where his name alone moves the needle. He's not just a director anymore, he's become something closer to a movie star in the way his reputation carries weight. But with the Odyssey, it feels like we're in slightly different territory. For the first time in a while, there's actual controversy and pushback happening around one of his projects before anyone has even seen the full cut. And a lot of that is coming from the casting. Lupita Nyong'o is playing Helen of Troy, and people have been losing their minds about it online for months now. Some are calling it race swapping, some are saying it disrespects the source material, and others are treating it like proof that Hollywood is determined to ruin everything. I'm going to be honest about where I stand on this. I don't really care that much. Helen of Troy is a mythical figure. She's not a real person from history whose descendants are going to be offended. What actually matters to me is whether Lupita makes the role work on screen. If she brings the kind of presence and danger that makes you understand why men would burn the world down over her, then I'm fine with it. Is she going to deliver? I don't know. Are there better choices out there to play Helen of Troy? There absolutely is, but I've seen too many movies where they cast someone who looks right on paper and the performance ends up being completely forgettable. I'd rather have someone who actually delivers than someone who was chosen just to avoid arguments. A lot of the outrage around this also feels like it's mostly contained to the internet. The people I talk to in real life who actually buy tickets aren't sitting around writing long posts about it. They're mostly just waiting to see if the movie looks good. Now, the Elliot Page situation feels different to me because it's clearly forced. From what's been reported, she's playing Sinon, who isn't even in the Odyssey. Sinon is the character who convinces the Trojans to bring the wooden horse inside their walls. He is a figure from Trojan War mythology, but his story is actually told in Virgil's The Aeneid, written centuries later, and it's hard not to look at this and see it as a calculated move. It feels like someone in a meeting decided they needed an award season talking point and slotted her in. It's the kind of decision that turns a movie into a culture war headline before it's even finished, instead of just letting the story exist on its own terms. It forces people to talk about the casting rather than the actual film. That part does feel forced and unnecessary. What makes this whole thing less worrisome for me is that Nolan has a history of taking source material and changing it when he feels it serves the movie better. He didn't just translate American Prometheus directly into Oppenheimer. He restructured the timeline, emphasized certain themes, and made choices that weren't strictly in the book. He did something similar with The Prestige. He took the novel and made creative adjustments that worked better for the screen. So when people assume he's just going to take whatever version of the Odyssey he's been given and film it exactly as written, I think they might be underestimating how he usually operates. Most of the conversation right now is focused on who's playing who and what their skin color is, but there's something bigger that isn't getting as much attention. Nolan is apparently working from Emily Wilson's translation of the Odyssey, which is a very modern and heavily feminized version of the story. Wilson's translation leans into certain interpretations and themes that aren't part of the more traditional readings of Homer. It contains less graphic violence and is in many ways more feminized than the previous versions. Now, I wouldn't be shocked if Nolan does what he's done before and takes significant creative liberties with it. He might keep what serves his vision and quietly move away from the parts that don't. But there's also the possibility that studio pressure pushed him to stay closer to that particular translation because it fits the current cultural climate. That, to me, feels like a much more important conversation than another argument about casting. Because the core of the Odyssey is about a man trying to return home after years of war, facing gods, monsters, temptation, and his own flaws. If that central story gets reshaped too heavily to fit a very specific modern lens, it could lose some of what makes it powerful. Nolan has earned enough trust from me over the years that I'm willing to wait and see what he actually does. But I'm also not pretending that studio influence doesn't exist in these big productions. There's also the question of how the movie will actually feel once we're watching it. Costumes and accents can make or break the immersion in a story like this. If everyone sounds like they're performing in a very expensive stage production instead of actual people from that world, it might pull you out of the experience. Same with the production design and how the gods and monsters are handled. These are the kinds of details that can either make a film feel truly epic or make it feel like expensive cosplay. But again, I'm not going to judge any of that until I actually see the movie. The opening weekend tracking is also pretty high right now. which is telling. It's tracking to open between $80 and $100 million domestically. Despite all the online arguments, there's still a large audience that wants to see what Nolan does with this story on the big screen. The loudest voices on social media don't always represent what actually happens when tickets go on sale. Most people are not even aware of the tense discourse happening online, which proves even more that the online space is a bubble and it doesn't reflect reality at all. At the end of the day, I'm still planning to see the Odyssey when it comes out. I'm going in with cautious optimism. Nolan has a strong track record of delivering ambitious, well-crafted films, and I'm hoping he manages to do that here even with all the noise around the project. If it ends up feeling compromised or overly shaped by outside pressures, I'll say so, but I'm not writing it off based on casting announcements alone.